Maybe it's the information we're using. Maybe it's a blank form, a column on a form that nobody knows what to fill out.
Yeah.
Maybe it goes to this person and this person doesn't ever do anything. But all of those things together, when we look at Fabric, when we look at GenAI, when we look at where we're coming at, where we're going to, those if only questions, if we just step back and say, if only I had access to this, or if only I understood what that code, then that just gives us so much more opportunity to solve the
Yeah.
ifs.
Hi, everyone. This is Casey Lai, founder of Prometheum, back again with you on another exciting episode of the Data Fabric Show. And I'm super happy and super glad to have my guest today, Joyce Myers from MTSI. Joyce, say hello, everyone. And if you don't mind giving a little bit of introduction on who you are and what MTSI does.
Morning. Thank you, Casey. I appreciate it. Like Casey said, I'm Joyce Myers. I'm with MTSI. That stands for Modern Technology Solutions Incorporated. But MTSI is a lot easier to say. So we are a contractor that supports the public sector and the defense, and we provide engineering and technical services. So our customers are across that defense footprint. And how do we help them through engineering services and technical service to solve their really hard problems, right? How do we come to the table and help them solve their scientific problems, their mathematical problems, their engineering problems? And it's really super challenging. I'm the chief data officer, so my focus is inward to the company. I've been there a little over a year. I'm their first chief data officer. So the company is 31, almost 32 years old, almost 31 years old. And what that does is internally, I get such an opportunity. You know, most companies have done things this way or this way. And as we continue to mature in this space, I get to be part of the journey to help the company.
That's close. And you are the first chief data officer that MTI has ever had. So usually that's exciting and scary at the same time, as I've seen, right? If you've watched one of my previous episodes, I had Matt Clark from National Grid with me, and he talked about, hey, there's three types of chief data officers, right? There's the arsonist. Someone comes in and his job, her job is to burn it down. Whatever it wasn't working, right? There's a caretaker, right? Look, we just need someone to just, make sure things keep running the same way that they've been doing. And we just want a single, point of contact to go through it. And there's the Phoenix, right? Basically, hey, let's do things differently, or, rise from the ashes after someone burned something down. Let's revive everything. Love to kind of get your thoughts on that. And, what do you think? What do you think your role at MTSI is a little bit with this first role as the chief data officer?
Well, I love that. I don't know that I've heard that before. Those observations. Actually, it's a little bit different. I think that there's such a solid foundation there. The company is successful. We are an employee-owned company, so it gives it a different flavor
Nice.
than a big corporation. So everybody is an owner of this company, right? Everybody
Wow.
wants to do the best thing. So I think my role is really building on the foundation, right? Helping
Nice.
architect the next story or the addition or right, adding to what we've already done so well. And then maybe doing some home improvements where, maybe some things could be a little bit better than they were 30 years ago because we've learned more. So I see myself more as a builder and maybe architecting the new add-ons, if you would.
There you go. So I'm going to call you the general contractor. How's that?
There you go.
And Joyce, why do you think, after 31, 32 years, MTSI finally decided, we need a chief data officer? Was there, something that kind of got them to the point where they feel like they really, need to be more data driven, need to worry more about governance? I'm kind of curious to know kind of how this role came up and, how it intersects with kind of the company's history.
And so it kind of ties together with, imagine every company, your company, you do things a certain way, very entrepreneurial. You do what happens to make it happen, and you grow and you grow and you grow. And then you realize that perhaps you were so busy making things happen that maybe the organization of things isn't quite as good as it could be. Maybe you get a bunch of stuff in a file cabinet. That real cabinet ends up being a bunch of folders on your desktop. And you just can't really find the thing you were looking for. You know you have it, but you don't remember where you put it. Or know the person who knows it, but it doesn't get written down or captured anywhere, right? So as a smaller company that's entrepreneurial and grows, so does the data. So how, if you look back at yourself and you're like, oh, we're getting bigger, we want to continue to get bigger. How do we wrap our arms around this so that we can use all this amazing information that we have to just help us continue down the path? And so I think that's really what it was. Yeah. Self-assessment. They're like, we've done really well. We want to continue to do well. What is that innovative thing that we can do? And hiring a chief data officer is not necessarily innovative, but if you've never done it before, then it is.
Now, do you think it was more around governance, like, hey, we should probably get our house in order a little bit, or was it more around, maybe trying to find new ways to market and new innovative ways to market, leveraging data, or trying to grow the business by allowing employees to make better data-driven decisions? Which one do you think was kind of a bigger driver, would you say, in kind of getting you in the seat?
I think growing the business is always going to be a top priority, right? I mean, from a business perspective, growth is important. And so I think that's a driver. But then when you start to peel it back, like, well, what do we need to grow? Well, we need to develop a business. We need to do BD. Well, BD needs some marketing. Okay, so where do we get that information? So I think it's really a combination of the two. But ultimately, any corporation wants to, or any business, regardless of their size, wants to grow. And as an employee-owned company, that's good for the employees, right? That growth is
absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because it's an employee-owned company. So I think that puts in a very interesting perspective, because I think I would think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that every employee probably feels a little bit more emboldened and empowered, right, to kind of help the company make the right decisions. And so one of the things that we've seen with GenAI, right, in recent years is there's really like this big aspect of self-service, right, that comes in with GenAI that allows more, especially non-technical users to do a lot more, especially in the areas of analytics, right? We've seen GenAI really help with data discovery. We've seen it with, say, data prep. We've seen it with, annotations, and, obviously SQL building, text to SQL, those things as well. Has that been something that you guys have looked at or actively looking at? And love to kind of hear from you guys, from your perspective, what's worked to what's still kind of a little bit challenging, kind of figuring it out, and just share your perspective with the audience.
Remember, I said we work for the public sector and the Department of Defense. So we have an area around us that's a little bit different, right? So we have an inherent responsibility to protect our information and our customers' information, proprietary, sensitive, classified, right? So we have that inherent responsibility. So that adds a little bit higher level of complexity. You can't just go throw yourself into ChatGPT or an AI tool, GenAI tool, and say, hey, do this for me. Go write this code. Well, you have to be a lot cognizant of that, right?
Right.
When you add that wrapper around it, sometimes that makes it a little less fast, because you want to make sure you're doing your due diligence and that you're protecting your information, your customers' information. So there's that little level there. But we know absolutely that GenAI can improve not only our internal productivity, it can help empower our employees to make the decision right there, to learn something new, to ask a question on how do I do this? It really triggers that innovative thought, that critical thinking with solid prompting. Like you had mentioned earlier, and this is one of the things I always say, right? That the business knows they have a problem they need to solve, but they're not always good at articulating that. And coming from that background before I came into the data world, or they kind of, we're working towards how do we provide that self-service capability that allows people to ask that right question and know it better, but then maximizing what we're allowed to outside of our security cases to help people learn to ask those prompts, learn, make things better. But we're also working internally, right, with large language models and learning, hey, wait a minute, if our data were better, these would be them. We have strong governance foundation, data quality, the outputs would be just like everybody else, just like the whole world is discovering. You hear garbage in, garbage out. I like to say goodness out.
I love it.
Right? Yeah. Because we are emotionally attached to the data we've created. We're emotionally attached
100%.
to processes. Why the data engineers were resistant.
Yeah, 100%.
We want to or not, as humans, we identify ourselves with the work we do.
No, I think you bring up a good point. And like, I think, Gartner actually did a CIO survey this year, and they found that 49% of CIOs have noted either hesitant or haven't had success rolling out GenAI projects. And the number one reason was, can we trust that the data is going to be accurate, reliable, and secure? That was actually the number one reason, right? Everyone knows why they want to do it. It's everything you said, right? The new ideas, getting more employee productivity, empowering employees. But that remains, right, one of the big problems. And not sure how it is at MTSI, but in a lot of organizations, you have data from multiple sources, right? Multiple databases, data warehouses, data lakes, and clouds. And so it is difficult to know whether or not this is, quote unquote, the right one, right? Also, in data analytics, as you know, ends on, do you have a semantic model? Do you have a data model? Is it using the right data model, et cetera? And so there's a lot of time where, yes, the data quality is definitely an issue, but also keep in mind that analytics today is still a very human involved task, right? Of, the right person knows that right table, those right columns, this right particular join, this right complex prep. And so while, Gen AI has come a long way, which I'm a big proponent of, in a lot of organizations, if you're not, 100% right initially, that initiative can get a bad rap, right? It's very natural for human beings, like, oh, it's wrong, I'm not going to look at it. And so I think that's one thing that we've seen. And so one of the struggles for data leaders is that they know it's the right thing, but how do you do it in a way where you don't get off to a false start and a bad start, right? Is one thing that I've seen data leaders struggle quite a bit. And then the other thing that I think, some organizations have realized it, but some haven't yet, is that the power of Gen AI, if you do it right, if it's architected right, is that it gives that experience to the business user where you don't have to nail that question perfectly the first time. It's the power of seeing the results quickly and being able to tweak and tune and iterate by yourself, right? And then having that history, oh, this is what I did, and it's all documented, right? It's all in a capture, so that way, from governance perspective, someone in your need goes back and say, well, gosh, Casey, Joyce, why the heck did you guys do it this way, right? It's captured in there. And I think that is actually very powerful because very few humans, I think, maybe you're special and you're much smarter than we are, but very few people, like, when they're doing data analytics, they don't know instantly the first time the exact question and the exact output that's going to be the right one, right? You have to see it. You have to see the output and go, ooh, gosh, it's totally not what I'm looking for. Or, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what would happen if I added this dimension, right? So I think that's one of the cool things that I've seen organizations kind of really latch onto, and which I think is great because it kind of addresses my first point, right? The naysayers, like, oh, if it's not right the first time, we're not going to use it. I think people who do that are missing the point, right? It's about that iterative process, that iterative experience that you get to do, and as long as that process is documented, right? As long as the output is documented, the logic is documented, then I think it's a pretty powerful thing, right? That we're able to kind of deliver back to business. So now, from that perspective, obviously a big fan, but I always like to share this, with my guests and with customers is don't get too caught up on that first question.
One of the things, so when I started, right, a lot of people don't know what a chief data officer is, what we do. And I'll be very transparent. I'm not a data scientist. I don't do data analytics, right? Like a mathematician. I grew up in the Army as an Army civilian, so very familiar with the business process side of it.
Mm.
And I always like that asking why, right? Simon Sinek, start with why. Well, why did we put that information together? And I remember years ago, I had one of the most brilliant software people working for me, but something wasn't working and we couldn't figure out why. And in the old days, people may or may not put a note in the code to say why something was doing something. But you had just trail, we can see why we asked that question or why we did that. And so it's always gone with me. If we understand the why, not just our personal purpose or professional purpose, but why did we put that together? Why are we doing it that? And then also people they don't necessarily trust it, but if you look back, and I know it's one of the big books out there, right? I mean, and I've read it and I love it. Randy Bean's Fail Fast, Learn Faster. So I use that when we have a sprint. Like, well, what if we don't get it right? Okay, then we try again. We figure out what we got wrong and why, and we try again. We ask it differently. We bring in a different stakeholder. We get a different perspective. Maybe we came at it from our lens, and we need the business to the left and right of us to expand our lens so we can see the whole picture. Because, for example, if you are in finance and you know what your numbers mean, but you don't know how your IT guy uses the numbers necessarily, or you don't know how the HR person uses the numbers, not really seeing what the numbers are being used for. And so and I just use those, but I mean, it could literally be any sector of the business. So knowing the why we did something helps us do it better.
Context.
Trying not to be, now, okay, you don't want to just fail. You don't want to go into it with a failure mindset, but you have to be okay with things not going right and then learning from it and adjusting.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think I think in the past, and data analytics has been built in a way of it has to get it right. And that's why pipelines, people spend a lot of time doing data pipelines, doing ETL jobs and so forth. And so everything was always that curated. And that's why, it's good and bad, right? Good in that you're always guaranteed to get the right output. Bad is that, if you think of a pipeline, you think of physical metal pipes, right? It's not really all that agile, all that flexible. And so we traded off flexibility. We traded off, being able to do ad hoc questions and being able to ask questions on the fly. And I think this is where, like kind of what I've been doing, Data Fabric has been kind of interesting because it introduces this notion of, well, what if we didn't have to always rely on these, rigid pipelines and rigid curated ways? What if there was a way to answer questions where it was fast and flexible and it was iterative? And once you're done experimenting or once you're done confirming, then by all means put it into the pipeline process. But having everything go through that pipeline process just meant you're creating a lot of burden and stress on the data engineering team because every little change can make the pipeline brittle and break, but then you're hurting the agility on the business side, right? And so that's where I think one of the notions of Fabric has actually really taken off well, especially in the age of Gen AI, where people want that fast iterative process, and you want to be able to see the output before you commit to building that complex pipeline, moving all that data over, right? It's kind of this, I think Gartner calls it kind of the mode 2 pipeline, whereas mode 1 is, you build your physical pipelines, and mode 2 is, it's not a materialized pipeline until you're done. You've seen the output, you confirmed it, and then you build it into mode 1, right? And you build it into a physical pipeline. And so I think this is where the idea of that data fabric actually goes very, very well, right? With Gen AI, goes with what we talked about, kind of that making it so you're not afraid to ask a question. Because I think a lot of times business users have almost been kind of shamed or guilted into like, don't ask me something bad, don't ask me something stupid. Like, I don't have time for that. Right. And nobody wants to do that. But at the same time, if you shut down people being curious, you're potentially closing the door on innovation. Right. And so I think this is where it's that balance, but the technology is there is what's exciting, right? Gen AI is there, data fabric is there. And so this ability to do this ad hoc self-service now, it's at an age that we've talked about for a long time. It was supposed to be the dream of big data, if you remember, right? Like, oh, everyone needs these Hadoop data lakes because, hey, who wants to waste time on the, extraction and translation? Just load that thing and then we'll figure it out. There was nothing fast about Hadoop, if you remember it, right? still there's nothing fast about it. But that was the dream. That was what we all believed, right? In like 2009. And I think we all believed until about 2017. And finally we're like, enough is enough. Like 12 years is enough, but we're not buying it anymore.
Well, I think too, right, with the fabric, when you think about it at its very nature, and there's probably a reason for the name, fabric is a bunch of threads woven together to create beautiful solution. And for me, in a previous job, my job just before this, right, there was a big focus on human-centered design, right? The delightful user experience. So whether the user is a data engineer or is a chief financial officer or is just somebody who wants to go answer a question, when you bring that fabric, right, and like you said, when you start to put the things together, use what you already have, right? If you build a pipeline or you already have a warehouse or you already just have a bunch of folders, use what you have. And like I said, I'm not burning anything down. I'm just looking at the house we already have and how do we shore foundation? How do we do a sunroom on the side, right? But now let's business unit. Maybe they're not technical. Maybe they're not, but now they can find this stuff. They can put it together. Oh, wait, if I put this with this, it lets people on my side, the data management, right? From the time that data is created or acquired or consumed all the way through to when you destroy it. Although, let's be real, nobody ever destroys the data. It's
once the pipeline's built, once that report has been built, it ain't going anywhere.
never, ever, it never goes.
It doesn't matter if no one ever looks at it. It doesn't matter. It's not going anywhere.
You've got your business team and your data team. And so this is funny. We call those separate, but we're all part of an organization. And the data, the business of data is still a business, right? So we're all coming at it from a business outcome perspective. Maybe it's not, how do I grow my business? Then the data team's always over here thinking, which SQL do I need to make? Or which pipeline do I need to make? But if they know why, and I've said this once before, so I had the opportunity years ago to go visit NASA here in the Huntsville area. And they consistently win best workplace in the federal government, consistently. And I'm like, I want to know why. And it's because every single person in that organization knows their common goal, whether they're the data person, whether they're the top physicist, whether they're the engineer, the coffee delivery guy, they all have a common goal, right? Let's get them in ours or whatever the case may be. At that time, it was just so impressive to me. So that's one of the things I took with me, right? When I meet with the team, I've got folks from across the different business areas. What is our common goal? Can you see yourself and why it matters to you in that goal? I'm going to talk about data and maybe you don't understand it, but are we solving a problem that you've had? And I've always, as a supervisor, as a manager, I've always challenged my folks every year in their performance and their objectives is to submit at least one process improvement. It doesn't have to be implemented to be successful, but to think of it, and they're like, oh, I don't know that. I'm like, if we have ever said, if only, I wish, that sucks. The idea for a process.
If you know it sucks, you can suggest an improvement, right?
Maybe it's the information we're using. Maybe it's a blank form, a column on a form that nobody knows what to fill out. Maybe it goes to this person and this person doesn't ever do anything. But all of those things together when we look at Fabric, when we look at GenAI, when we look at where we're coming at, where we're going to, those if only questions, if we just step back and say, if only I had access to this, or if only I understood what that code, then that just gives us so much more opportunity to solve the
Yeah.
ifs.
Joyce, I don't know if you realize this, but you kind of described and defined what a data product is and why we need a data product. Because we all know what dashboards are, we all know what data sets are, we all know what queries are, and obviously we know what tables are. But those by itself are always devoid of context, right? You have a dashboard, you don't know, well, how is it put together? What data did you use, right? You have a data set. Well, what question were you trying to solve that asked you to write this data set, right? And so we're so used to dealing with these individual components that what I'm seeing a lot of organizations now struggle with is it's hard to get that common goal, right? That actually is super important. And so the idea of a data product is when someone looks at a product, a data product, they know who asked the question, what department they're from, what their role is, why did they ask the question, what project it was for, who are they collaborating with, who did they ask it to, right? And why do they ask it to? Oh, they asked this person because they're a subject matter expert in this particular area. Okay, great. And then you get into data contracts. What do I need from this deliverable? Right? I need you to get data from these sources. Why? I need the data to be this fresh. Why? And I need you to show me lineage because so I can trust where it actually is coming from. And so this is the idea of a data product that is really kind of an evolution beyond what we have. If I said it was really the output, which is a dashboard or somewhere in between the data set or a query. But it made it really hard if someone said, hey, I'm looking for X, to know all the whys, right? Why did this person ask this? Why did they ask this person? Why did they ask it this way? Why isn't it okay that I gave you data from 2 years ago? Because I'm trying to figure out what happened, last month, predict what's going to happen the next month. So don't get but that's not clear when you look at, dashboards out there, when you look at data sets out there. So you've actually just perfectly explained what a data product is and why we need a data product. So congratulations, Joyce, and I'm going to use this episode for all data leaders to listen to, because that is precisely why data products have become so popular in recent years, because I think we're going to solve the velocity problem. I think we're going to solve the data heterogeneity problem. I think we're going to solve the scale problem. So now the next challenge is, well, now I'm going to have way more data assets than I ever had before. I need to know what they're for and why they were created before I know how to actually use them. So that's kind of where I think it's kind of nicely how you kind of explain that and put it all together, Joyce. Well, Joyce, I've had a blast, talking to you. Really enjoyed kind of getting your perspective on things. Congratulations on being the first chief data officer for MTSI, and keep doing the wonderful things that you guys are doing for our defense and for our country. So it's obviously very important, and really would love to just thank you once again for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and your experiences on the show. And I'm sure everyone's going to be going to find it very, very helpful and insightful in terms of kind of this episode and what you're able to share with them. So again, really enjoyed it. Everyone, fabulous, Joyce Myers from MTSI. Thank you for being a wonderful guest. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of Data Fabric Show.
Thanks, Casey. It was great.